A 10-year-old girl's dream trip turns into a nightmare when a pilot publicly mocks her special golden ticket. He thought it was a joke, a piece of worthless paper from a little girl with an overactive imagination. But he had no idea who she was, or more importantly, who gave her that ticket. He laughed in her face, shattering her excitement in front of a plane load of passengers. But the triumphant smirk would be wiped off his face when the truth was revealed, delivering a dose of karma so severe it would end his career forever. What happens next will leave you speechless. The air in the Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport hummed with the electric thrum of 1,000 different stories converging. It was a symphony of rolling suitcases, hurried announcements, and emotional reunions. For 10-year-old Maya Washington, it was the overture to the greatest adventure of her life. Clutched in her small hand, so tightly the edges were beginning to curl, was her golden ticket. It wasn't just paper, it was a promise, a shimmering portal to a world she had only ever dreamed of. Maya was a girl whose imagination soared higher than any jumbo jet. While other kids were playing with dolls or video games, Maya was devouring books about Bessie Coleman, the first African-American woman to hold a pilot's license. She had posters of modern-day aviation heroes like Captain Stephanie Johnson, the first black female captain for Delta, plastering her bedroom walls. Her dream wasn't just to fly, it was to be at the controls, to feel the power of the engines and to navigate the endless cloud-strewn highways of the sky. This trip was the culmination of that dream. It was a special Wings of Wonder flight, an annual charity event hosted by Delta Airlines for children with critical illnesses or from disadvantaged backgrounds. Maya, who had spent a significant portion of her young life in and out of hospitals battling a severe autoimmune disorder, had been nominated by her doctor. But the golden ticket was something extra, a surprise that had arrived by special courier 2 weeks prior. It was thick, creamy cardstock with elegant embossed gold lettering that read, "Golden Ticket, one future aviator's pass to the cockpit." Her mother, Darlene, watched her daughter with a heart full of love and a touch of anxiety. Seeing Maya's eyes wide with an excitement that outshone the terminal's fluorescent lights was a balm to her soul. Darlene had fought tirelessly for her daughter's health and happiness, and this trip felt like a victory lap. Maya was in remission, her spirit was resilient, and today she was just a kid on an adventure, not a patient. "Hold on to that tight, sweetie," Darlene said, her voice warm as she adjusted the strap of Maya's small backpack. "I am, Mama," Maya whispered, her gaze fixed on the ticket. She had barely let it out of her sight since it arrived. It felt magical, like something straight out of a storybook. Their boarding group was finally called for Flight 1776 to Orlando. As they shuffled down the jet bridge, Maya's heart hammered against her ribs. Every step brought her closer. When they reached the entrance of the aircraft, a flight attendant with a kind smile greeted them. "Welcome aboard," she said. Maya, brimming with a confidence born of pure joy, held up her pass. "Hi, I have a golden ticket," she announced, her voice clear and proud. "I get to see the cockpit." The flight attendant, a young woman named Sarah, blinked in surprise. She had never seen a ticket like that before. The gold foil caught the light, and it certainly looked official, if unusual. "Oh my," she said, her smile widening. "That looks very special. Let me just check with the captain." She disappeared for a moment into the cockpit. Maya bounced on the balls of her feet, her eyes darting past the galley, trying to get a peek. She could hear muffled voices. A moment later, a man in a crisp white pilot's uniform emerged. He was tall, with sandy blonde hair, a square jaw, and an air of unassailable authority. This was Captain Miller. He glanced down at Maya, his eyes briefly flicking over her bright pink t-shirt and beaded braids, before settling on the ticket she held out to him. He took it from her, a slight, almost imperceptible smirk playing on his lips. He turned it over in his hands, his thumb rubbing over the embossed lettering as if testing its authenticity. "A golden ticket, huh?" Captain Miller said, his voice laced with a condescending amusement that Maya didn't immediately recognize, but that sent a prickle of unease down Darlene's spine. "Where did you get this, kid?" A cereal box? His co-pilot, a younger man, chuckled from inside the cockpit. Maya's smile faltered. No, sir. It was sent to me. It's for the Wings of Wonder flight. Captain Miller let out a short, disbelieving laugh. It wasn't a kind laugh. It was sharp and dismissive, and it echoed in the confined space of the jet bridge entrance. Right. Wings of Wonder. Look, kid, we're on a tight schedule here. We don't have time for games. He handed the ticket back to her, his gesture a clear dismissal. Why don't you go find your seat? I'm sure they have some coloring books for you. The warmth that had filled Maya evaporated, replaced by a cold, creeping shame. Her face burned. The golden ticket, once a symbol of a magical promise, now felt like a flimsy, foolish piece of paper. Her eyes welled with tears, and the vibrant colors of the airport blurred into a watery mess. She looked at her mother, her expression a silent plea for understanding, for protection from this sudden, sharp cruelty. Darlene stepped forward, her protective instincts flaring like a lioness. "Excuse me, Captain," she said, her voice low but firm, a steely edge that had been forged in countless battles with doctors and insurance companies. "That was uncalled for. This is a special charity flight for children. My daughter was told this ticket was a special honor. There's no need to mock her." Captain Miller's gaze shifted to Darlene. He sized her up in a heartbeat, a black woman flying coach on a charity ticket, and his expression hardened. The feigned amusement was gone, replaced by an undisguised arrogance. "Ma'am," he began, his tone patronizing, "I am responsible for the safety and security of this aircraft. The cockpit is not a playground. I can't just let anyone who shows up with a homemade pass wander in. It's a serious security protocol. Now, if you'll please take your seat, we need to prepare for departure." He didn't even wait for a response, turning his back on them and disappearing back into the cockpit. The door clicked shut, a sound of finality that sealed Maya's humiliation. The other passengers in line behind them were beginning to stir, some looking on with sympathy, others with impatience. The kind flight attendant, Sarah, looked horrified. "I am so sorry," she whispered to Darlene, her eyes full of genuine remorse. But the damage was done. The dream was shattered. Maya, who had walked down the jet bridge with her head held high, now felt small and foolish. She let her mother guide her down the aisle to their seats, her gaze fixed on the drab gray carpet. The golden ticket was crumpled in her fist, its magic gone, leaving only the bitter taste of a grown-up's casual cruelty. The cabin of the Airbus. A 321 was a world of muted blues and grays, a stark contrast to the vibrant hopes Maya had carried on board. As she slumped into her window seat, the crumpled golden ticket felt like a hot coal in her palm. She didn't want to look at it, but she couldn't bring herself to let it go. Tears she had been holding back now streamed silently down her cheeks, tracing paths through the faint shimmer of glitter that had rubbed off the ticket. Darlene's heart broke for her daughter. She pulled a tissue from her purse and gently dabbed at Maya's face. "Hey, look at me, baby girl," she said softly, trying to pitch her voice above the roar of her own anger. "That pilot, he was just a grumpy man having a bad day. It has nothing to do with you or your ticket. You are special, and that ticket is special. He's the one who's wrong, not you." But Maya was inconsolable. It wasn't just the denied entry, it was the way he had laughed. It was the public humiliation, the feeling of being dismissed as if she were nothing. The Wings of Wonder flight was supposed to be a safe haven, a day where her illness and struggles didn't define her. Instead, she had been made to feel small for daring to believe in a little bit of magic. As the other passengers settled, Darlene's anger began to solidify into a cold, hard resolve. She was not going to let this go. This wasn't just a grumpy pilot. It was a man in a position of power who had used that power to belittle a child who had already been through more than most adults. She noticed the flight attendant, Sarah, walking down the aisle, her face still etched with concern. Darlene caught her eye. "Can I speak with you for a moment?" Darlene asked, her voice quiet but insistent. Sarah immediately knelt by their row. "Of course, I am so terribly sorry about what happened. Captain Miller's behavior was completely unprofessional." "It was more than unprofessional," Darlene corrected, her tone sharp. "It was cruel. This flight is for children, many of whom are very sick. What he did was inexcusable. Is there a head flight attendant I can speak to? Someone I can file a formal complaint with?" "I am the lead flight attendant on this flight," Sarah confirmed. "And you absolutely can. As soon as we're airborne and the seatbelt sign is off, I will bring you the necessary forms. I witnessed the entire exchange, and I will be filing my own report as well." She glanced at Maya, who was now listlessly staring out the window at the scurrying ground crew below. "That ticket," Sarah said, lowering her voice. "It looked very unique. Do you mind if I ask where it came from?" Darlene hesitated for a second, then decided Sarah's empathy was genuine. "It came by courier a couple of weeks ago. There was a letter with it from the Wings of Wonder Foundation. It said it was a special award for Maya's courage. It named this specific flight. It said to present it to the captain for a pre-flight cockpit tour." Sarah's brow furrowed. She had worked the Wings of Wonder flight for 3 years in a row. They often had special guests and small perks, but she had never heard of a golden ticket. Yet the Foundation's name was on it. Something didn't add up. Captain Miller had dismissed it as fake, but Darlene's explanation gave it a weight of authenticity. "I believe you," Sarah said, "and I am going to look into this, not just for the complaint, but for Maya." She gave Maya's shoulder a gentle squeeze. "We'll get this sorted out, I promise." As Sarah walked back to the galley to prepare for the safety demonstration, her mind was racing. Captain Robert Miller was known among the cabin crews for his arrogance. He was a technically proficient pilot, but his people skills were notoriously poor, especially with anyone he deemed beneath him. He was a stickler for rules when it suited him, and dismissive of them when it didn't. He had likely taken one look at the unusual ticket and Maya's hopeful face and decided it was a nuisance, a deviation from his rigidly controlled pre-flight routine. But what if he was wrong? What if the ticket was real? The flight took off, ascending smoothly into the vast blue canvas of the sky. Below, the city of Atlanta shrank into a geometric pattern. For anyone else, it might have been a beautiful sight. For Maya, it was just a reminder of the cockpit she wasn't in, of the view she was supposed to have. Once they reached cruising altitude, Sarah was as good as her word. She brought Darlene a tablet to fill out the official customer complaint form. As Darlene meticulously detailed the incident, using precise and powerful language to describe Captain Miller's condescending tone and dismissive actions, Sarah returned to the galley. She subtly pulled out her company-issued tablet and, using the plane's Wi-Fi, accessed the internal Delta employee portal. She started with a search for Golden Ticket and Wings of Wonder. The first few results were just general press releases about the charity program, nothing specific. She then tried a different approach. She navigated to the flight's manifest and cross-referenced the Wings of Wonder passenger list. She found Maya's name, with a small asterisk next to it. Clicking the asterisk, a note popped up. It was brief and cryptic. VIP Ma, Special Handling. See Foundation Liaison. Ma? Sarah whispered to herself. The initials meant nothing to her, but VIP and Special Handling were not terms the airline used lightly. Captain Miller should have had access to this same manifest. Had he even bothered to check? Or had his prejudice and arrogance blinded him to the possibility that this little black girl with a shiny ticket was, in fact, a VIP? A new suspicion began to form in Sarah's mind. This wasn't just a case of a grumpy pilot. This was negligence. Captain Miller hadn't just been rude. He had failed to perform a basic due diligence check on a passenger with a clear VIP designation. Her next move was a bit riskier. She navigated to the corporate directory and looked up the Wings of Wonder Foundation liaisons. There were several names. She recognized one, a senior manager in the marketing department named Brenda Walsh. Sarah knew Brenda was not on this flight, but she was probably the point of contact. Taking a deep breath, Sarah composed a carefully worded email. She knew it might be overstepping her bounds as a flight attendant, but her conscience wouldn't let her rest. Subject: Urgent Inquiry, Flight 1776, Wings of Wonder, VIP. Dear Brenda, I am the lead flight attendant on today's Wings of Wonder flight to MCO. We have a young passenger, Maya Washington, who boarded with a special golden ticket for a cockpit visit. This was unfortunately denied by the captain. Her manifest is marked with the code VIP-MAW and a special handling note. Could you please provide any immediate clarification on this? The child is very distressed, and I believe a serious error in protocol may have occurred. Thank you for your urgent attention to this matter. Sincerely, Sarah Jenkins, lead flight attendant, Flight 1776. She hit send, her heart thumping. She had just set a powerful ripple in motion. Whether it would become a gentle wave or a tsunami that would crash down on Captain Miller, she didn't know. But she had done her part. Now, all she could do was wait and try to bring a little bit of comfort back to the little girl in seat 14A. Inside the cockpit of Flight 1776, Captain Robert Miller was the picture of calm and control. His hands rested lightly on the controls, his gaze sweeping across the array of glowing instruments. The co-pilot, a younger, more impressionable man named David, handled communications with air traffic control. For Miller, this was just another routine flight, a milk run to Orlando made slightly more annoying by the charity element. Can you believe that, lady? Miller scoffed, breaking the professional silence. Getting all bent out of shape over a fake ticket. Some people are so entitled. David chuckled nervously. He had felt a pang of discomfort watching the little girl's face fall, but he wasn't about to challenge his captain. Miller's reputation preceded him. Yeah, I guess. Seemed pretty important to the kid, though. They're kids, Miller said with a dismissive wave of his hand. Everything seems important. That's why there are rules. The cockpit is a sterile environment, not a petting zoo. End of story. He adjusted his headset, the picture of a man thoroughly convinced of his own righteousness. He had forgotten about Maya and her golden ticket the moment the cockpit door had closed. It was a non-issue, a blip on his radar that had already faded from the screen. He was completely oblivious to the storm that was gathering just beyond the reinforced door. Meanwhile, 35,000 feet below, in a sleek, glass-walled office in Delta's Atlanta headquarters, Brenda Walsh's phone buzzed with an email notification. As the senior manager for corporate social responsibility, the Wings of Wonder program was her baby. She scanned Sarah Jenkins's email, and her blood ran cold. Oh no, she breathed, her eyes widening. No, no, no. VIP-MAW. The code seared itself into her brain. It wasn't an airline code. It was a personal designation from the program's most significant and most anonymous benefactor. A benefactor so private that only 3 people in the entire company knew her real name. Brenda was one of them. MAW stood for Mary Alice Williams. To the world, Mary Alice Williams was a ghost, a legend. To the aviation community, she was a titan. A retired Air Force test pilot who had broken speed and altitude records in the 1970s, she had transitioned to commercial aviation and become one of the first black female captains for a major airline. She had flown through the turbulent skies of racism and sexism to carve out a legendary career. After retiring, she had amassed a quiet fortune through savvy investments and had dedicated her life to philanthropy, with a special focus on encouraging young girls of color to pursue careers in STEM and aviation. She was the primary funder of the Wings of Wonder program, on the condition of absolute anonymity. Her involvement was a secret held tighter than any trade secret, and the golden ticket was her personal touch. Brenda's hands trembled as she dialed her boss, the Vice President of Flight Operations, Mark O'Connell. It was a call she never wanted to make. Mark, we have a 5-alarm fire on 1776, she said, her voice tight with urgency, the second he picked up. She quickly explained the situation, the golden ticket, Captain Miller's dismissive actions, and most importantly, the identity of the child's sponsor. There was a moment of stunned silence on the other end of the line. Mark O'Connell was a man who dealt with engine failures and security threats. This, somehow, felt worse. Mary Alice Williams was more than just a donor. She was the conscience of the airline, a living legend they were immensely proud of, even if they couldn't boast about her publicly. Insulting her personally chosen candidate was like spitting on the company's own legacy. "Where is Miller now?" Mark's voice was dangerously quiet. "In the air. ETA in Orlando is about an hour. Get me everything you have on Miller. Performance reviews, commendations, complaints. Everything," Mark commanded. "And get me the passenger manifest for the return flight. I want him and his co-pilot grounded the second they land. They are not to fly back. I'll arrange a new crew. I'm flying to Orlando myself. Now." The corporate machinery, once set in motion, moved with terrifying speed. Within minutes, Captain Miller's entire professional life was being dissected. The file painted a clear picture. A pilot with excellent technical skills, but a recurring pattern of arrogance and interpersonal conflicts. There were several complaints from flight attendants about his condescending attitude, and a past incident where he had been formally reprimanded for a verbal altercation with a gate agent. He was a liability they had tolerated because of his clean flight record. That tolerance had just expired. Back on the plane, Sarah Jenkins was doing her best to salvage Maya's day. She brought her a special snack box, a set of plastic pilot wings, and even a detailed map of their flight path. Maya accepted them with a polite, sad little smile, but the light in her eyes was gone. Darlene watched, her anger a low, simmering fire. She had finished the complaint form, her words a precise and damning indictment of Miller's behavior. Then Sarah's tablet pinged. It was a reply not from Brenda Walsh but from Mark O'Connell, the VP of Flight Operations himself. Subject: Urgent inquiry. Flight 1776. Wings of Wonder VIP Miss Jenkins. Thank you for your diligence and professionalism. You are correct to report this. A serious breach of protocol has occurred. Please do everything in your power to make Miss Washington and her daughter comfortable. Assure them that this matter is being handled at the highest level. A senior executive will be meeting the flight upon arrival in Orlando. Please discreetly inform Miss Washington of this. Under no circumstances are you to mention this to Captain Miller or the co-pilot. Maintain normal cabin operations. Mark O'Connell, VP, Flight Operations. Sarah's breath hitched. The highest level. She had expected a reprimand for the pilot, perhaps a written apology. She had not expected the direct intervention of a vice president. The significance of the golden ticket was clearly far greater than even she had imagined. She walked back to row 14, her heart pounding a nervous rhythm. She knelt once more, this time speaking only to Darlene in a low, conspiratorial whisper. "Ma'am," she began, "I have an update. I'm not sure how to explain it, but that ticket was more important than any of us knew. The top executives at corporate are aware of what happened. They have asked me to tell you that a senior vice president is flying to Orlando to meet you personally when we land." Darlene's eyes widened in astonishment. "A vice president? You're serious?" "Completely," Sarah affirmed. "They are taking this extremely seriously. They just ask that we don't say anything to the pilots." A slow, grim smile of vindication touched Darlene's lips. The wheels of justice were turning, and apparently they were attached to a corporate jet. She looked at Maya, who was now tracing the flight path on the map with her finger, a flicker of her old curiosity returning. "Thank you, Sarah," Darlene said, her voice filled with a gratitude that went beyond words. "Thank you for believing my daughter." For the remainder of the flight, a strange, tense quiet settled over the aircraft. In the cabin, 2 women and a little girl held a secret that was about to change everything. And in the cockpit, a blissfully ignorant Captain Miller flew on, soaring through the clear blue sky, completely unaware of the thunderous, career-ending storm that was about to break directly over his head. The descent into Orlando was smooth. As Flight 1776 taxied towards the gate, Captain Miller made his standard cheerful arrival announcement, his voice smooth and professional. On behalf of Delta and your entire crew, I'd like to welcome you to Orlando. We hope you have a wonderful stay or a pleasant journey home." He felt a sense of satisfaction. Another perfect flight. Another day of demonstrating his superior skill. He was already thinking about the short layover and the steak dinner he planned to have before the return flight to Atlanta. As the plane docked at Gate 73 and the jet bridge connected with a soft bump, he began his shutdown procedures. He was just about to unbuckle when a sharp rap on the cockpit door startled him. "Enter," he called out, annoyed at the interruption. The door swung open, but it wasn't a flight attendant or a member of the ground crew. It was a man in a sharp, dark suit, his face a mask of cold fury. Beside him stood a pale and shaken Brenda Walsh from marketing, and flanking them were two uniformed airport security officers. The man in the suit was Mark O'Connell, the vice president of flight operations. Captain Miller had only ever seen him in corporate videos. His presence on the tarmac in his cockpit was as shocking as a flock of birds flying through an engine. "Captain Miller," Mark said, his voice quiet but carrying the weight of absolute authority. "I'm Mark O'Connell. We need to have a word." His eyes flicked to the co-pilot. "You too, David. Stay right where you are." Miller's arrogance, his cast-iron shield of self-importance, began to crack. This was not normal procedure. "Mr. O'Connell, this is an unexpected pleasure. Is there a problem with the aircraft?" "The problem isn't with the aircraft, Captain," Mark said, stepping fully into the cramped cockpit. "The problem is with you." He held up a tablet, the screen showing a high-resolution photo of the golden ticket. "Do you recognize this?" Miller's blood ran cold. The ticket. That stupid fake ticket. "It's some kind of pass a kid had," he stammered, his confidence evaporating. "I told her for security reasons I couldn't allow her in the cockpit. It wasn't an official document." "Not official?" Mark's voice dripped with incredulous contempt. He turned to Brenda. "Brenda, would you care to enlighten the captain on the official nature of this document?" Brenda Walsh, looking like she'd rather be anywhere else, stepped forward. "Captain, that golden ticket was a personal gift. It was created and sent by the primary benefactor of the entire Wings of Wonder program. She personally selects one child each year for this honor. That child was Maya Washington." Miller felt a knot of dread tighten in his stomach. A primary benefactor. That sounded expensive. That sounded important. "I wasn't aware," he said, his voice now a weak imitation of his usual command. "The manifest had a note, but it was just some code." "A code you didn't bother to investigate," Mark snapped. "A VIP designation you chose to ignore. You didn't check, you didn't ask. You just saw a little black girl and her mother and you made an assumption. You decided they weren't important. You laughed at her." He took a step closer, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper. "Let me tell you who you laughed at, Captain. Do you know the name Mary Alice Williams?" Miller's mind went blank. The name sounded vaguely familiar, like someone he should know, but he couldn't place it. He shook his head. Mark's expression was one of utter disgust. "Of course you don't. You should. Every pilot in this company should. Mary Alice Williams was one of the first black female captains to ever fly for this airline. She was an Air Force legend before that. She is a hero, a pioneer, and the woman who anonymously funds this entire charity program because she believes in giving kids who look like her a chance to dream. That little girl Maya is her personal guest. The initials on the manifest, MAU, stood for Mary Alice Williams. You didn't just brush off a passenger, Captain. You insulted a living legend and the very soul of this program." The world tilted under Robert Miller's feet. The blood drained from his face. Mary Alice Williams. That Mary Alice Williams. The name suddenly clicked, dredged up from some long-forgotten aviation history class. He felt a wave of nausea. He hadn't just made a mistake. He had committed a sacrilege. I had no idea," was all he could manage to say. "Exactly," Mark roared, his voice now echoing in the small space. "You had no idea because you didn't care to know. You were so wrapped up in your own arrogance that you couldn't be bothered with a simple act of kindness, an act that was, in fact, a required part of your duty on this flight. As this drama unfolded in the cockpit, Sarah was escorting Darlene and Maya off the plane. As promised, Mark O'Connell had arranged for them to be the first to deplane. When they stepped into the jet bridge, they saw him, this powerful man in a suit, waiting for them. But he wasn't alone. Standing beside him was a woman who radiated a quiet, powerful grace. She was an older African-American woman, her hair a stylish silver crown, her eyes sharp and intelligent, yet filled with a profound warmth. She was dressed in a simple but elegant pantsuit. She stepped forward and knelt, so she was at eye level with Maya. "Hello, Maya," she said, her voice like warm honey. "My name is Mary Alice, and I believe this belongs to you." She held out her hand, and in it was another golden ticket, identical to the one Maya still had clutched in her fist. "I am so very sorry for what happened today. No one should ever make you feel like your dreams are small, especially not a pilot." Maya stared, speechless. Darlene's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes filling with tears of disbelief and overwhelming emotion. This was her, the anonymous benefactor, the legend herself. She had flown to Orlando just for them. "I heard you're a big fan of Bessie Coleman," Mary Alice continued, her smile genuine. "Me too. I brought you something." She handed Maya a small, beautifully wrapped gift. From inside the cockpit, Miller could hear the gentle voices in the jet bridge. He risked a glance out the side window. He saw the vice president. He saw the marketing manager. And he saw the elegant, silver-haired black woman kneeling in front of the little girl he had ridiculed. He watched as she took the girl's hand, the image a portrait of grace and power he could never possess. Mark O'Connell turned back to him, his face grim. "Captain Miller, as of this moment, you and your co-pilot are suspended from all flight duties, pending a full investigation. You will hand over your company ID and be escorted from the airport. Your career at this airline is over. You are a disgrace to that uniform." The words hit Miller like a physical blow. Over. The word echoed in the sudden, deafening silence of the cockpit. His career, his pride, his identity, all of it, gone. Destroyed by a moment of casual cruelty, an arrogant laugh, and a golden ticket that turned out to be more real and more powerful than he could have ever imagined. The speechless one now was him. The sterile, impersonal atmosphere of the airport crew lounge felt like a prison. Robert Miller sat slumped in a plastic chair, the silence pressing in on him. The crisp white shirt of his uniform felt like a costume he was no longer entitled to wear. Across from him, his co-pilot David stared at the floor, the picture of misery. They had been stripped of their wings, metaphorically and literally. An HR representative had unceremoniously collected their company IDs and informed them that a formal termination hearing was a mere formality. The karma was swift, brutal, and utterly devastating. Miller's mind replayed the scene in the cockpit over and over. Mark O'Connell's cold fury, the reveal of Mary Alice Williams's identity, the final, crushing judgment. He had built his entire identity around the prestige of being a captain for a major airline. He had relished the authority, the respect, or as he now sickeningly realized, the fear he commanded. In the space of 10 minutes, it had all been dismantled. His phone buzzed. It was a news alert from a major aviation blog. Delta captain suspended after mistreatment of child on Wings of Wonder charity flight. The story was already breaking. His name wasn't mentioned yet, but he knew it would be. The shame was a physical weight pressing the air from his lungs. Meanwhile, a world away from Miller's personal hell, Maya Washington was finally living her dream. But it was a dream grander than she had ever imagined. Mary Alice Williams had not just come to apologize. She had come to make things right, with the kind of powerful grace that only she possessed. Instead of the cramped cockpit of the A321, Maya, Darlene, and a beaming Sarah Jenkins were now standing in the main hangar of Delta's Orlando maintenance facility, and before them stood a marvel of modern aviation, a brand new gleaming Airbus A350, the airline's flagship international aircraft. This, Mary Alice said, her arm sweeping towards the colossal airplane, is what a real cockpit looks like. Their guide was not a grumpy, arrogant man. Instead, walking toward them with a radiant smile was Captain Teresa Colon, one of Delta's top A350 pilots, a decorated veteran and a woman of color who had been personally mentored by Mary Alice years ago. "Maya, it is an absolute honor to meet you," Captain Colon said, shaking Maya's hand with a firm, respectful grip. "Mary Alice has told me all about you. I hear we have a future aviator in our midst." For the next hour, Maya was not a patient or a victim. She was a VIP. Captain Colon led her up the stairs and into the A350's cockpit. It was a technological wonderland, a spacious glass cockpit with massive multifunction displays, a far cry from the older model on Flight 1776. Maya's eyes, which had been so dull with sadness just hours before, were now two brilliant stars, reflecting the glow of 100 illuminated buttons and screens. She sat in the captain's seat, her small hands hovering over the controls as Captain Colon explained what every switch and dial did. She explained the principles of flight, the complexities of navigation, and the sheer joy of breaking through the clouds into the sunlit expanse above. She spoke to Maya not as a child, but as a peer, a future colleague. Mary Alice and Darlene watched from the doorway, their hearts overflowing. Darlene saw the resilience of her daughter, her ability to bounce back from hurt and embrace joy. Mary Alice saw a reflection of her younger self, a girl full of wonder, with a fire in her belly for the sky. She knew, with absolute certainty, that she had chosen the right child. Sarah Jenkins, the flight attendant who had set everything in motion with a single email, stood by, feeling a profound sense of rightness. This was justice, not just the punishment of a cruel man, but the restoration of a little girl's dream, made bigger and brighter than it had been before. Later, in a private lounge the airline had prepared for them, Mary Alice finally shared the contents of the gift she had given Maya. It was a first-edition signed biography of Bessie Coleman. Tucked inside the cover was a handwritten note. "Maya, never let anyone dim the light of your ambition. The sky is not the limit. It is just the beginning. When you are ready, call me. Your first flying lesson is on me. Your friend, Mary Alice." Tears streamed down Darlene's face as she read the note over Maya's shoulder. This was more than an apology. This was a mentorship. This was a future. The airline's public relations team, meanwhile, had gone into overdrive. Guided by Mark O'Connell, they didn't try to hide the incident. They owned it. They released a full-throated public statement. It praised the heroic actions of flight attendant Sarah Jenkins. It celebrated the legacy of their own hidden figure, Mary Alice Williams, who had for this one occasion agreed to let her name be used. It detailed the wonderful experience they had provided for Maya, and it unequivocally condemned the unacceptable behavior of the now terminated pilot, promising a full review of their training protocols to ensure such a thing could never happen again. The story went viral. It was a perfect narrative for the modern age, a story of prejudice and comeuppance, of corporate responsibility, and of the uplifting power of kindness. Sarah Jenkins was hailed as a hero. Captain Teresa Colon became an instant role model, and Maya Washington, the little girl with the golden ticket, became a symbol of hope and resilience, her smiling face, sitting in the captain's seat of an A350, gracing news websites around the world. The scales of justice had not just been balanced, they had been tipped so far in favor of goodness and light, that the darkness of one man's prejudice was utterly and completely extinguished. For Robert Miller, the day ended in disgrace and obscurity. For Maya Washington, it ended with her hand in that of a legend, her eyes on the horizon, and the promise of a future where she wouldn't just fly. She would soar. A year can feel like a lifetime. The 12 months following the incident at Gate 73 unfolded not as a single chapter, but as two vastly different epics written in the contrasting inks of consequence and opportunity. For Robert Miller, the fall was not a sudden crash, but a long, grinding descent into a purgatory of his own creation. Karma, he discovered, was not a singular event, but a new, suffocating atmosphere he was forced to breathe every day. His termination hearing was a masterclass in bureaucratic indifference. It took place in a windowless room at Delta's corporate headquarters, a place he'd only ever entered for commendations. This time, he was flanked by a junior union representative who couldn't meet his gaze and an HR executive whose expression was one of polite, unyielding finality. They presented the facts: his blatant disregard for the VIP code on the manifest, his history of interpersonal complaints, and the damning, detailed reports from both Darlene Washington and Sarah Jenkins. His defense, that he was protecting the sterile cockpit, that the ticket looked fake, evaporated under the cold fluorescent lights. It sounded pathetic, even to his own ears. The union rep offered a half-hearted plea for suspension and retraining, but it was futile. Robert Miller was no longer an asset. He was a multi-million-dollar liability, a PR nightmare wearing a pilot's uniform. The finality came when the HR executive slid a simple form across the table and asked for his company ID. The act of unclipping the badge he had worn with such pride for 15 years felt like surrendering his own skin. He walked out of that building a ghost, the automated glass doors sliding shut behind him, sealing him off from the only world he had ever valued. The public fallout was a digital wildfire. Aviation blogs, then mainstream news outlets, picked up the story. His name and smug company photo were plastered everywhere, a meme for entitled arrogance. He became Captain Cereal Box. The calls from friends and colleagues, initially inquiring, quickly dwindled, replaced by an echoing silence. The most painful blow came from his girlfriend, a pragmatic flight attendant named Chloe. She sat him down in the living room of his gleaming Buckhead condo, the one with the panoramic views of the Atlanta skyline, and laid it out with brutal clarity. "This isn't just about a mistake, Rob," she said, her voice devoid of its usual warmth. "It's about who you are. I saw the way you talk to waiters, to gate agents, to me sometimes. That pilot on the news, that was the real you. I just didn't want to see it." She was packed and gone within the hour, her departure leaving a silence in the condo more profound than any engine roar. His days lost their structure. He'd wake at noon, the sun glinting off the glass towers he could no longer afford. He became an obsessive curator of his own downfall, endlessly scrolling through articles and comment sections, his rage and self-pity fermenting into a toxic brew. He saw Maya's smiling face everywhere, the golden ticket girl, a symbol of hope. To him, she was the face of his ruin. He drafted long, rambling blog posts defending himself, painting himself as the victim of a corporate witch hunt and a snowflake society. They were met with a handful of sympathetic comments from anonymous trolls and a deluge of public ridicule. He was a joke. The money ran out faster than he'd thought possible. He was forced to sell the condo, watching as another younger man with an easy smile signed the papers to take over his life. He moved into a cramped, musty apartment in College Park, so close to Hartsfield-Jackson that the walls trembled every time a heavy jet took off. The sound that had once been the symphony of his power was now a constant, agonizing taunt. After 8 months of unemployment and mounting debt, desperation led him to the dregs of the aviation industry. He took a job as a co-pilot for a tiny, beleaguered cargo airline operating out of Deadhorse, Alaska. His new life was a brutalist poem of ice and iron. He flew a Shorts 360, a 40-year-old unpressurized turboprop affectionately known as the Shed, hauling drilling equipment, frozen food, and mail across the desolate North Slope. His world shrank to the gray expanse of the tundra, the oppressive darkness of the Arctic winter, and the constant bone-jarring rattle of the old plane. One night, flying a load of frozen salmon to a remote village, he caught his reflection in a dark navigation screen. The man staring back was a stranger, hollow-eyed, unshaven, his face a roadmap of bitterness. The arrogant god of the skies was gone, replaced by a lonely man hauling fish in the dark. The karma was not a thunderclap of justice. It was the quiet, unending drone of a mediocre existence, a life sentence of obscurity. For Maya Washington, that same year was a period of explosive growth and carefully nurtured purpose. Mary Alice Williams and Darlene formed a protective and empowering alliance around her. They allowed her to be the face of the story, but shielded her from the toxic undertow of the media. Mary Alice, with decades of experience navigating a hostile world, taught Maya how to own her narrative. "They will try to make you into a simple symbol, little bird," she'd say during their weekly video calls. "A victim or a hero. You must insist on being a person. Your story is not what happened to you. It's what you chose to do next." This lesson crystallized 6 months later at a black tie gala for the Wings of Wonder Foundation. The ballroom was filled with Atlanta's elite, the air buzzing with the energy of a good cause that had become a great story. Maya, in a simple but elegant dress, stood on a stage before 1,000 people. Her voice, though soft, carried through the massive room with unwavering clarity, as she announced the winner of the first Maya Washington Future Aviators Scholarship. The recipient was a 17-year-old girl named Fatima, a brilliant student from a refugee family in Chicago who dreamed of flying but whose circumstances had made it seem impossible. As Fatima came to the stage, her eyes wide with disbelief and gratitude, Maya didn't just hand her the oversized check. She gave her a hug and whispered, "The sky is waiting for you." In that moment, Maya transformed the golden ticket from a personal prize into a perpetual key, passed from one hand to the next. The pinnacle of her year, however, came on a crisp, cloudless autumn day. On her 11th birthday, Mary Alice took her to a small private airfield. There, gleaming in the sun, was a Cessna 172. The smell of aviation fuel was the most beautiful perfume Maya had ever known. She climbed into the pilot's seat, her heart a hummingbird in her chest. Mary Alice's voice was a calm, reassuring presence in her headset, guiding her through the pre-flight checklist. Maya's hands, once dismissed as too small, confidently wrapped around the yoke. She pushed the throttle, and the plane vibrated with life. As they raced down the runway, Mary Alice said softly, "Okay, little bird, gently pull back." Maya did, and the world fell away. The rumble of the runway was replaced by the whisper of the wind. She was airborne. She was flying. The patchwork of Georgia farms spread out below her. A beautiful, impossible map. It was 1,000 times better than the view from a passenger window. This wasn't a view. It was a connection. She felt the plane as an extension of her own body, a vessel for her soaring spirit. The humiliation of Flight 1776, the sting of that laugh, the crumpled ticket. It all burned away in the brilliant sunshine, leaving only the pure, uncut joy of this moment. She was in control. She was home. The ripples of that day continued to spread. Sarah Jenkins thrived in her new role. She spearheaded the Golden Standard of Care, a program that became the new benchmark for the airline. She traveled the country, not just training flight attendants, but listening to them, creating channels for them to report misconduct without fear of reprisal. She had turned a moment of personal courage into a movement of institutional change. And then there was David, the co-pilot. Fired and disgraced, he hit rock bottom. For months he was haunted by his own silence, the ghost of his nervous chuckle in the cockpit. One night he sat down and wrote a letter. It took him hours. He poured out his shame, his regret, and his admiration for Darlene's strength and Maya's spirit. He didn't make excuses. He took full ownership of his cowardice. He mailed it, expecting no reply. A month later, a small envelope arrived. Inside was a card from Darlene. It read, "Mr. Collins, thank you for your letter. It takes great courage to face one's own mistakes. My daughter and I wish you peace. What matters is what you do next." Those words were his absolution and his call to action. He began volunteering, speaking at flight schools about the critical importance of a co-pilot's moral authority and the dangers of a toxic power dynamic in the cockpit. His story, told with raw, unflinching honesty, was more impactful than any textbook lesson. A year later, a small regional airline, hearing of his work, offered him a second chance. He returned to the sky a different man, quieter, humbler, and infinitely wiser. The story, in its final, sprawling form, was one of perfect, intricate justice. It was an ecosystem of cause and effect. A single act of arrogant prejudice had set in motion a chain of events that led one man to a cold, lonely purgatory. And a single act of courage from a flight attendant, amplified by the integrity of a corporation and the grace of a legend, had turned a little girl's crushed dream into a soaring reality. A reality that created scholarships, changed policies, and even redeemed a fallen man. Maya Washington, the girl who was once laughed at for her golden ticket, was now charting a course toward her own golden wings, the vast, welcoming sky her undeniable and hard-won destiny. The story of Maya and Captain Miller is a powerful reminder that our actions, no matter how small, have consequences. A single act of kindness can change a life, while a moment of cruelty can shatter a career. Maya's golden ticket wasn't just paper. It was a test of character, and Captain Miller failed spectacularly. If this story moved you, please give this video a thumbs up to help spread the message. Don't forget to share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to our channel for more unforgettable stories of drama and justice. What did you think of Captain Miller's karma? Let us know in the comments below. We read every single one. Thank you for watching.